She was 3 years old, standing on an auction block in the blazing sun, holding a raggedy teddy bear, and not a single person in that crowd wanted her. "Too small to be useful," one farmer said. "Damaged goods," another whispered. "Something's broken in that one." The auctioneer was about to send her back to an orphanage that was more prison than home, a place where children disappeared and no one asked questions. Then a man who hadn't spoken to anyone in 4 years stepped forward, a man whose wife and newborn son were buried on a hill behind his ranch, a man who had sworn never to let anyone close again. He looked at that silent little girl with the scars on her back and the emptiness in her eyes. And he said one word that changed everything: "Wait." What he didn't know was that powerful people had already claimed her for something far darker, and they would stop at nothing to take her back. This story will show you the most powerful truth about family. It isn't born, it's built. And some people are worth every fight it takes to keep them. If you believe that every child deserves someone willing to fight for them, drop a comment below. And subscribe so you never miss another story that proves love can heal what cruelty breaks. This story starts in Silver Creek, under a sun so hot it felt like a judgment. Nathaniel Holloway, Nate to the few who dared, had only come for a stallion from the Garrett farm. Just business. For 4 years, he'd run the biggest horse ranch in Montana Territory and let no one get close. 4 years since his wife Clara and their newborn son were laid to rest. The walls around his heart were so high, folks said he was a ghost. "Nate, over here!" His friend Jake Turner grinned from across the street. "Figured you were laying low till next week." "Changed my mind," Nate said, not breaking his stride. "Heard Garrett's got that gray stallion, and I aim to see him before he's gone." "Garrett ain't around," Jake said, falling in beside him. "The whole town's at the placement fair." Nate stopped cold. "The what?" "Orphan auction," Jake explained, spitting a stream of tobacco juice. "Train brought a load of 'em from back east, mostly farmers looking for cheap hands." "That's got nothing to do with me." "Didn't say it did," Jake said, looking at him sideways. "But if I were you, I'd steer clear of the town square. They're down to the last few." Nate should have listened. He should have turned his horse around and headed for the quiet of his ranch. But something, maybe the memory of Clara's gentle voice, pulled him forward. The square was packed tight. Folks were fanning themselves, trying to beat the miserable heat. At the center of it all, on that platform, stood a man in a sweat-soaked suit, his voice hoarse from hollering. "Come on now, people, she's the last one. Surely somebody needs a helper." Nate worked his way through the crowd for a better look, and when he saw her, his heart seized up. It was a child, a tiny thing, no more than 3 years old, so skinny she looked like a strong breeze could carry her off. Her blonde hair was a tangled, dirty mess around a face that seemed to be all eyes, big, brown, empty eyes. Her dress was in tatters and her feet were raw and bleeding. And in her arms, she clutched that beat-up teddy bear like it was the only thing holding her together. She didn't make a sound, just stood there, waiting for the world to decide her fate. The auctioneer's voice turned desperate. "She eats like a bird, I tell you. No trouble at all." But the crowd was restless. A farmer up front shook his head. "Too small to be any use. I ain't running a charity." "What good is a runt?" another man hollered. A woman nearby whispered, "Poor thing, but we can't take on another mouth to feed." Then Nate heard someone behind him mutter, "Damaged goods. You can see it in her eyes. Something's broken, that one." The auctioneer wiped his brow. "Fine. If nobody steps up, she goes back to the orphanage in Helena." Nate's blood ran cold. The Helena orphanage wasn't a home, it was a workhouse. Children who went there came out hard and broken, if they came out at all. This wasn't his fight. He had a ranch, horses, a life he'd built to keep this exact kind of trouble out. But then the little girl shifted on her feet, and Nate saw her wince in pain. She never made a sound. That quiet suffering hit Nate harder than any scream. This child had already learned that her pain didn't matter to anyone. "Going once!" the auctioneer called out, his voice full of defeat. "Going twice." "Wait." The word was out of Nate's mouth before he could stop it. Every person in that square turned to stare at him. "Mr. Holloway?" the auctioneer said, stunned. Nate didn't hesitate. He strode right up onto that platform. The little girl flinched as he got closer but held her ground, hugging that bear for dear life. "How much?" Nate's voice was rough as gravel. "Well, sir, this ain't exactly proper." "I said how much?" the man stammered. "The placement fee is $5. Nate pulled out his wallet and slapped $50 on the podium, 10 times the price. "That ought to cover it," Nate said. "Get the papers." A buzz went through the crowd. Folks started whispering about him losing his mind. Nate paid them no mind. He knelt down slow and easy to get on the little girl's level. She was even smaller up close. "Hey there," he said, his voice soft. "What's your name?" She just stared, silent. "That your friend?" Nate asked, nodding at the bear. "He got a name?" Nothing. But he saw a flicker of something in her eyes. "I'm Nate," he went on. "I got a big ranch with lots of horses. You ever seen a horse up close?" She gave the tiniest shake of her head. Nate reached out real slow and gently touched the bear's worn ear. "They're softer than this fella, I promise." The girl looked from his hand to his face, sizing him up. He could see how smart she was, a survivor trying to figure out if he was another threat. "Mr. Holloway," the auctioneer interrupted, shoving papers at him. "Just sign right here." "In a minute," Nate said, never taking his eyes off the child. "I'm talking to her." "She don't talk," the auctioneer said. "Orphanage matron thinks she's simple." "I didn't ask what you think," Nate snapped, and the man backed off quick. He looked back at the little girl. "I'm going to pick you up now, all right? I'm taking you somewhere safe. Somewhere with a warm bed and plenty of food." She looked at him for a long, hard moment. Then, so faint he almost missed it, she gave a single nod. Nate scooped her into his arms. She weighed next to nothing, just a bundle of bones wrapped in rags. She tensed up, expecting to be hurt, but he just held her gently. "It's all right," he murmured. "You're safe now." He signed the papers with one hand and walked through the parting crowd, their whispers chasing him like flies. He ignored the talk of scandal and the judgment. Reverend Whitmore, the hypocrite who ran the local orphanage, wouldn't like this one bit. Jake was waiting by the wagon, his eyes as big as saucers. "Nate, what in the—" "Not now, Jake," Nate said, carefully setting the little girl on the wagon seat. Nate ignored Jake's hollering as he took up the reins. He knew exactly what he had just done. The little girl sat beside him, silent as a stone, clutching a worn-out teddy bear. Her bare feet were a mess of cuts and bruises. She just watched the wide-open country roll by without a word. Once town was a speck behind them, Nate asked her real gentle, "What's the name of your bear?" The silence stretched out for a good long while. Then she whispered so quiet he almost missed it, "Biscuit." Her voice was all raspy, but it was the first sound she had made. "Biscuit," Nate said. "That is a fine, strong name." She looked right at him then, with big brown eyes searching for the lie that always came before the hurt. "He is my friend," she whispered. Nate kept his eyes on the road ahead. "I can tell. Mama gave him to me," she said before she went to sleep. Nate understood what that meant. He knew kids didn't have the words for something so final. "I am real sorry about your mama," he said. She just hugged Biscuit tighter. After a while, the ranch appeared over a rise. The main house stood solid and proud, with barns and pastures full of horses all around. "That right there is home," Nate said. The little girl's eyes got wide. "It is big," she said. He almost smiled. "Yeah, a little too big for just me. It gets awful quiet out here." She thought about that for a second. "You are alone?" "Well, I have folks who help out, but at night it is just me." "Lonely?" The question, coming from a child who couldn't be more than 3, hit him hard. "Sometimes," he admitted. She answered so quietly he nearly missed it. "Me too." The wagon pulled up to the house and the front door flew open. A woman with a flowered apron, Martha, stormed onto the porch. "Nathaniel Holloway, what in God's name have you done now?" Nate lifted the little girl down from the wagon. "Martha, I need your help." Martha had been running the Holloway place for 20 years, ever since Nate's daddy was in charge. She was the closest thing to a mother he ever had. She froze on the steps, taking in the tiny girl, the rags she wore, and the haunted look in her eyes. "Lord have mercy," Martha whispered. "What did they do to this child?" "Nothing good," Nate said. "She needs a bath, some food, and for someone to look at her feet." Martha's shock turned into pure determination. "Well, bring her inside this minute." Soon Martha was heating water while Nate sat with the girl in the kitchen, getting her to eat some bread and cheese. She ate fast, like she was afraid someone would snatch it away. "Slow down, little one," Nate said softly. "Nobody's going to take that from you." She froze and just stared at him. A little bit of hope started to crack through the fear in her eyes. "The bath is ready," Martha called out. The girl's body went stiff as a board. Her eyes darted around, looking for a way to run. "Hey," Nate said, getting down on her level. "It is just a warm bath. It will feel good." "No," she said, her voice sharp with terror. "Please, no bath." Nate's heart twisted. "Okay," he said gently. "No bath tonight." She stared, waiting for him to get angry, but he just offered his hand. "Let us find you a room." She did not take his hand, but she followed him, a tiny shadow clutching her bier. Martha met them in the hall. "I have the blue room ready." Nate led the way. The room was simple, with a patchwork quilt on the bed and a window looking out at the horses. It was clean and safe. "This is all yours," Nate told her as she stood in the doorway. She looked from him to Martha, and then back at the room. Her little lips started to tremble. "Mine?" he said. "Yours." She walked in and touched the quilt, then the window, as if to make sure it was real. "Biscuit too?" she asked, holding up the bear. "Biscuit too." She sat on the bed so carefully, then looked up at Nate. "What is your name again?" "Nate," he told her. She repeated it. "Nate. You will not make me go back, will you?" The question just about broke him. "No," he said, looking her straight in the eye. "I will not make you go back. This is your home now." She studied his face for a long time, and when she saw he was telling the truth, she gave a tiny nod. "Okay." That one word was enough. Martha came in with a glass of milk and a clean nightgown. As Martha helped the little girl change, the truth of her life became clear. Her ribs showed right through her skin, and her body was covered in bruises. Then Martha made a choked sound. On the child's back were scars, old white ones and newer pink ones, whip marks, on a 3-year-old baby. Nate had to walk out of the room before the rage consumed him. He went outside and stood in the dark, his hands shaking. He was going to find the person who did this. Martha found him later. "She is asleep," she said. "I had to leave a lamp on." "I saw those scars," Nate said, his voice tight. "I know. I am going to kill someone," he said. It was not a threat, it was a promise. "Not tonight," Martha told him. "Tonight we figure out how to help that child. She needs more than just a roof over her head. She did not just learn not to cry, Nate. She learned how to be invisible. That kind of hardship leaves a mark." He remembered how she moved through the house, quiet as a church mouse, always watching. The way a sudden noise made her jump. How she ate her food like she was afraid someone would snatch it right from her. "So, what are we going to do?" he asked. "We give her time," Martha said, squeezing his arm. "We just keep showing her this place is different, that nobody's going to raise a hand to her, that it's okay to be a kid." She paused. "And we need to find out her name." Nate nodded. "I'll talk to the auctioneer tomorrow, see where she came from." "The town's going to gossip," Martha warned. "Reverend Whitmore won't like a single man taking in a girl." The Reverend can go mind his own business. A grim smile touched Martha's lips. I was hoping you'd say that. She turned back to the house. Nate, what you did today. Clara would have been mighty proud. He just nodded, a lump the size of a fist in his throat. The moon was high when a small voice called his name. Nate. He was in her room before he knew he'd moved. The little girl sat up in bed, clutching that bear with silver tears tracking down her cheeks. Hey now, he said gently, sitting on the edge of the bed. Bad dream? She nodded, her breath catching in a sob. Want to tell me about it? The dark room, she whispered. They put me in the dark room when I was bad. Nate's hands balled into fists. There's no dark room here. Not a one. You understand me? She looked up at him, her big eyes swimming. Promise? I promise. He reached out slow, giving her a chance to pull back, and wiped a tear away with his thumb. You're safe now. Nobody's ever going to hurt you again. She searched his face in the moonlight. Whatever she saw there seemed to be enough. Rosie, she whispered, hugging the bear tighter. My name is Rosie. A warmth spread through Nate's chest, a feeling he hadn't known in 4 long years. Rosie, he repeated. That's a real pretty name. He stayed in that chair until the sun came up, watching over the little girl who had busted through the walls he'd spent 4 years building. For the first time since he lost Clara, Nathaniel Holloway felt something more than hollow. He was scared. Scared of how much this tiny girl already meant to him. Scared of what he would do to anyone who tried to take her away. But mostly, he was determined. Rosie had spent her whole life being hurt and unwanted. Well, that ended today. From now on, she would know that somebody chose her. Nate didn't know the first thing about being a father, but he knew how to protect what was his. And Rosie was his now. God help the man who thought otherwise. That first week was a trial. Rosie followed him around the ranch like a little ghost, always 3 steps behind him. If he turned too fast, she flinched. If he hollered for Jake across the yard, she'd vanish. Martha cornered him in the kitchen. That child ain't eaten enough to keep a bird alive. She takes 2 bites and stops like she's waiting for a whipping. Then tell her she can eat. I have, Martha said, her face lined with worry. She's been taught that food is something you earn, Nate. His jaw went tight. She's 3 years old. I know. Later, he found Rosie in the barn, standing before a stall where a mare named Honey was nuzzling her newborn foal. That's Honey, Nate said softly. Had her little filly 2 days ago. Rosie stared with pure wonder. Want to pet her? The smallest nod was his answer. Nate opened the stall, murmured to Honey, and lifted Rosie up. The baby horse sniffed at her little hand, its soft nose bumping her fingers. Soft, she whispered. Real soft. Nate's voice was thick. Yeah, real soft. Rosie looked at him, and for the first time, he saw something besides fear in her eyes. What's her name? She don't have one yet, Nate said, setting her down. Maybe you could help me pick one. She thought hard for a moment. Buttercup. Buttercup, he nodded. I like that. That night she ate half her supper. It was a small thing, but it felt like a miracle. The nightmares, though, came every night. On the 4th night, the thunder rolled in, and he found her huddled in a corner. Rosie, he said, crouching down. What's wrong? The thunder, she shook. It sounds like him. Like who? The man with the belt. Nate's blood ran cold. He wanted to ask more, but she just curled up tighter. He sat on the floor beside her. The storm can't hurt you, he said quietly. It's just a big, loud noise. He said that too, she whispered. Right before he hurt me. Something inside Nate just broke. I am not him, he said, his voice steady as a rock. I will never, ever hurt you, Rosie. You hear me? She looked up, her big eyes searching his face. How do I know? The question hit him like a punch. You don't, he said honestly. Not yet. But I'm going to spend every day proving it to you. The thunder cracked and she flinched, but she didn't hide. Can you stay? As long as you need me. Martha's 10-year-old grandson, Tommy Jenkins, showed up on the 5th day. He blew in the front door like a little dust devil full of noise and vinegar. Rosie disappeared in a flash. Where'd she go? Tommy asked, looking around. Grandma said there was another kid here. You spooked her, Nate said, heading for the stairs. Stay put. He found her crammed under her bed, shaking like a leaf. He laid on his stomach to see her. Hey, it's all right, that's just Tommy. He's loud, but he's a good kid. He yelled. He's just excited, Nate said gently. Come on out, I'll introduce you proper. Slowly she crawled out. Nate scooped her up, and for the very first time she leaned into him, burying her face in his neck. It was progress. It was... Tommy, under strict orders from his grandma, was gentle as could be. Hi, he said, getting down on her level. I'm Tommy. What's your name? Rosie? She whispered into Nate's leg. That's a nice name, Tommy grinned. You want to come see Buttercup with me? Rosie looked to Nate for permission. Go on, he encouraged. I'll be right here. She took Tommy's hand and let him lead her to the barn. Martha came and stood beside Nate. That boy's got away with wounded critters. By supper time, Tommy had coaxed Rosie's first laugh from her. It was a small, rusty sound, but to Nate, it was the sweetest music he'd ever heard. You all right, boss? Jake asked, appearing beside him. Just fine, Nate managed. Jake looked over at the kids. She's coming around. Takes time with the broken ones. Knew a horse once, beat so bad he'd bite anyone who came near. Took 2 years before he'd let a soul touch him. A week later, Nate took Rosie to town for some proper clothes. He knew it was a mistake the second they got there. Folks stared and whispered behind their hands. There he is, one woman hissed. The one who bought that orphan girl like she was a calf. Shameful, another agreed. What kind of man lives alone with a little girl? Rosie heard them and squeezed his hand tighter. Just ignore them, Nate said low. They do not know a thing. But the whispers followed them everywhere. By the time they were done, Nate's jaw was aching from gritting his teeth. Then they ran into Harriet Price. The widow stood there in her fine black dress, her face a mask of false sweetness. Mr. Holloway, she said, and this must be the poor little creature you have taken in. Mrs. Price, Nate said, his voice flat as a board. We were just leaving. I am just so concerned for the child's welfare, Harriet said, her eyes looking Rosie up and down with pure poison. Gave Nate a bad feeling right down to his bones. A man like you can hardly give a girl the womanly guidance she needs. She has Martha. Harriet Price sniffed, saying, A servant is not a mother. If you just consider other options. I will not. The Whitmore Home for Children is an excellent... No. For a second, Harriet's polite mask slipped. Your stubbornness is not helping, Mr. Holloway. That child would be better served. The child, Nate cut in, his voice like ice, has a name, and she is not going anywhere. He walked right past her, holding Rosie's little hand, but the girl had gone white as a sheet. Her feet stumbled as they got to the wagon. Rosie? Nate knelt down. What is it, honey? She looked at me. Mrs. Price, don't you pay her any mind. She is just a bitter old woman. Number Rosie's voice was a scared whisper. She looked at me just like the other lady at the orphanage did, right before the bad things. A chill went through Nate. What lady? What bad things? But Rosie was gone, hidden away inside herself, her eyes empty. He lifted her into the wagon, his thoughts racing. The orphanage. Harriet Price. And the way she had looked at Rosie like she was sizing up livestock. Something was terribly wrong here. Later that night, with Rosie tucked in bed, Nate sat with Martha and Jake. "Tell me everything you know about Harriet Price," he said, his voice grim, "and what she has to do with the Helena orphanage." Jake looked uneasy. "Well, there are stories. Nothing solid, but stories about what?" "Widow Price lost near everything when her husband passed. It is common knowledge she can barely keep that big house of hers afloat." Jake hesitated. "The talk is she has been getting new help. Children," Martha said, her voice sharp as a tack. "From the orphanages. She calls them her wards, but they are just unpaid workers who get scraps for food. And when they get old enough to go—" She stopped. "Where do they go?" The room was silent. "Martha? Nobody knows." She looked Nate square in the eye. "That is the whole problem. They just disappear." Nate felt a sickness in his stomach. "And Whitmore, the reverend who runs the town orphanage?" "He is connected to the one in Helena," Jake said. "They say he and Mrs. Price have a deal." "What kind of deal?" "The sort where unwanted children end up with whoever pays the most." Nate shot up from his chair, sending it clattering to the floor. "And they put Rosie on that platform." "They would have," Martha said, grabbing his arm. "But you came along before they could. But how many others were not so lucky?" Nate paced the floor, torn between rage and horror. "How many kids have they—" "You cannot save every last one, Nate. I can sure as hell try. And lose Rosie for it?" Martha's tone cut through his anger. "If you go after Whitmore and Price, they will come for you. They will call you an unfit father. They will take her back." Her words stopped him cold. "They cannot. They can try. And in this town you have no wife, no real standing. No friends except for us." Martha just shook her head. "You start this fight now, and you could lose it all." Nate's hands balled into fists. Every part of him wanted to tear those monsters down, to protect every child they ever laid a hand on. But then he saw Rosie's face. The little girl who was just now learning to smile. The girl who did not jump at every loud noise anymore. The girl who trusted him. "What do I do?" "For now, you keep your daughter safe. You gather your proof. You find some allies." Martha's voice got softer. "And you pray they do not make the first move." Trouble came with the morning sun. Nate was in the barn with Rosie, teaching her how to brush Buttercup, when Jake came running. "There is a rider coming in, and he is coming fast. Looks official." Nate's stomach sank. "Take Rosie to Martha. Now." "But the horse," Rosie began. "I know, sweetheart, we will be right back. But I need you to go with Jake this minute." "Okay." His voice must have spooked her because she nodded and let Jake lead her away. Nate went to meet the rider, a young deputy who looked hot and bothered. "Mr. Holloway?" The man got off his horse and pulled a letter from his bag. "I have got papers for you from Reverend Whitmore." Nate took the envelope. When he read it, all he saw was red. "What is it, boss?" Jake asked, back from the house. Nate's voice was gravel. "It is a summons. Whitmore is fighting the adoption. He says I got Rosie through improper means. He wants her sent back to the orphanage until they review it. He can't do that. You paid good money. You signed papers." "Seems those papers were not worth a dime," Nate said, crushing the summons in his hand. "The auctioneer had no right to place a child. That is Whitmore's job. That is a load of bull. That auction has happened every year, and every year Whitmore turns a blind eye because he gets his cut." Nate was already marching to the house. "But I took a child he had already promised to someone else." Mrs. Price. Martha met them on the porch, Rosie peeking out from behind her dress. "What happened?" Nate could not find the words. He could not look at Rosie and tell her the safe new world he promised her was about to be torn apart. Martha saw his face and knew. "Rosie, darling, why don't you go play with Tommy in the kitchen? There are fresh cookies, but—" "Go on now, sweetheart." Rosie left, but she gave Nate one last frightened look. Nate handed Martha the crumpled paper. She read it, and her face lost all its color. "When?" 2 weeks. A hearing at the courthouse. Can we win?" "I do not know," Nate said, his voice empty. I need a lawyer. Someone who is not already bought and paid for by Whitmore. There is William Hart, Jake said. He is new to town. Young, full of ideals, and has not had time to be corrupted. Get him here. Today. Jake nodded and left without a word. Martha put a hand on Nate's arm. You cannot let her see you. Like this, she will know something is wrong, but she does not need to carry that weight. Not yet. Martha squeezed his arm. You will walk in there, put a smile on your face, and you will tell that little girl that everything is going to be just fine. You hear me? Nate took a long, shaky breath. When he finally walked into the kitchen, he was calm. Hey, sweetheart. He knelt down by Rosie's chair. Is that a good cookie? She nodded, her eyes full of worry. You looked scared out there. This child did not miss a thing. Just grown-up business, Nate said, trying to sound casual. Nothing for you to fret about. Is someone going to take me away? The question felt like a physical blow. No. He held her small hand. Nobody is ever taking you away from here. Promise? He knew he should not say it. He should have told her the truth about the fight ahead, but looking at her trusting face, he just could not do it. I promise. Rosie looked at him for a moment, then seemed satisfied and went back to her cookie. But when Nate stood, he saw Martha watching him. They both knew the weight of the promise he had just made, and they both knew that keeping it might cost him everything he had. William Hart showed up that afternoon. He was a young man with wire-rimmed glasses and a sincere face that made him look even younger than his 25 years. Mr. Holloway, he gave Nate a firm handshake. I have heard about your predicament. Then you know I am in a bind. I know that Reverend Whitmore thinks he can push you around, force you to give her up. William's jaw went tight. I reckon he's been crooked for a long while and nobody's had the spine to stand up to him. Will you? That's why I'm here, Nate said plainly. William opened his satchel. I've been building a case against him, talking to old orphans and finding where the money went. Whitmore is dirty, Mr. Holloway. He and Mrs. Price are in it together. A little hope sparked in Nate. Can you prove all that? Not just yet. But if we can buy ourselves some time, we can bring them down and keep Rosie safe. Nate glanced at the house where he could see Rosie laughing and playing with Tommy. He turned back to William, his voice firm. Whatever it takes, even if it costs me everything. Nate didn't even pause. She is worth it. William gave a slow nod. All right then, let's get to it. Now hold on. You know a man like you can't give a little girl what she needs. And what's that, Reverend? To be treated like cattle? To be hurt until she's scared of everything? A shadow passed over Whitmore's eyes. I have no idea what you're talking about. The scars on her back tell a different story. The silence was heavy. That child was already broken when she came to us, Whitmore finally said. It's the truth. He stepped closer, his voice low. Mr. Holloway, you have no wife and no family here. You expect folks to believe you can raise a child? I don't care what they believe. You should. In 2 weeks, a judge will decide, and my word will carry a lot of weight. Nate moved in until they were nearly touching. Threaten me all you want, Reverend. But if you try to take her, I will tear down everything you've built, every dirty deal, every child you've sold. Whitmore's face lost its color. You wouldn't dare. After a long standoff, the Reverend backed away. I see we have an understanding. We sure do. I'll see you at the hearing. Nate watched him go, then turned to find Rosie in the doorway. Was that the bad man? She asked in a small voice. He knelt and pulled her close. He's not going to hurt you ever again, sweetheart. But he wants to take me. He won't. She put her little hands on his cheeks. You're scared. I can see it. Nate's throat felt tight. Maybe a little bit. Don't be, she said, leaning her forehead against his. You're brave. How do you know that? Because you saved me. And people who save other people are the bravest ones there are. He hugged her, trying to blink back the burn in his eyes. For 4 years, he'd believed that caring for someone only led to pain. Now this little girl was showing him some things are worth any risk. That night he thought about the promise he made to this child. Whatever was coming, he would not face it alone. William worked non-stop. But Whitmore's influence was everywhere. Witnesses forgot things. Papers went missing. He's got the sheriff and most of the town council bought and paid for, William said. The judge, Abraham Stone, is a good man, but he can be pushed. So we find something so big they can't ignore it. Nate could barely sleep or eat with the hearing getting closer. Rosie sensed it too. Her nightmares came back worse than ever. "Don't let him take me," she cried one night, waking him up. Nate held her close. "I'm right here. He won't take you." "How do you know?" "Because I made you a promise," he said softly. "I don't want to go back to the dark room," she whispered. "You're not going anywhere. There are no dark rooms here." She finally fell asleep in his arms. Nate stayed awake, a new plan forming in his mind. If the law wouldn't protect her, he would take Rosie and they would disappear. It was a desperate idea, but it was something. A few days later, Dr. Eleanor Grant paid him a visit. She was a doctor from back east, sharp and well-respected by the women in town. "I heard what's happening," she said, holding her medical bag. "I want to help you." "How can you?" "I've seen other children from that orphanage." Her voice got hard. "They had injuries from beatings and worse. I tried to report it, but the sheriff just brushed me off, said it was a woman's word against a man of the cloth. But I will gladly testify for you at the hearing. First, though, I need to examine Rosie," she said. "I need to document her injuries for the judge." Nate knew Rosie was terrified of doctors. "I know," Eleanor said softly. "I will not force her, but her record could be the proof we need." He found Rosie in the barn. "Sweetheart, a doctor is here to make sure you are healthy." Rosie's face turned pale. "No, she won't hurt you, I promise." "They always say that," she cried, backing away. "They say they'll be gentle, but they lie." "No," she screamed and ran out of the barn before Nate could stop her. He found her a short while later, hiding in the hayloft, shaking and holding her dog. He climbed up slowly. "Hey there," he said gently. She didn't answer. He settled down on the ground a short ways off, giving her plenty of room. "I am real sorry I spooked you. That was not right of me." She stayed quiet. He tried again. "Can you tell me why doctors seem to scare you so bad?" The silence between them just hung there. Then she spoke so softly, he almost did not hear it. "They see the bad parts." "What parts are those?" "The parts that make you dirty," Rosie said, her voice sounding empty. "The parts that make folks not want you." Nate felt his heart just split right in two. "Rosie, sweet girl, there is not one single thing about you that is dirty. Not a thing." The other doctor said so. She finally met his gaze, her little eyes full of tears. "Back at that home, he looked at my back and told me I was damaged goods. He said nobody would ever want a broken little thing like me." A pure, white-hot fury burned through Nate's whole body. "That doctor was wrong," he said, his words tight. "Dead wrong. You are not broken, Rosie. You are not damaged. Not. You are perfect." "Then why did they hurt me?" The question just floated in the air like a poison. Nate did not have a good answer. There is no answer that makes sense of a grown person beating a 3-year-old child. "Because they were evil," he finally said. "Because something was wrong deep inside of them. Not you. You did not do a single thing to deserve what they did. Nothing." Rosie looked at his face with those old, knowing eyes of hers. "That lady doctor, is she a nice one?" "I believe so, but you do not have to see her if you do not want to." "Will looking at my bad parts help?" Lord, it tore him up to hear her say that. "It might help us stop the bad man, the one who is trying to take you away from here." Rosie thought on that for a long moment. Then she stood, dusted the hay off her little dress, and lifted her chin with a strength that just about broke Nate's heart all over again. "All right, she can look, but you have to stay with me. I will stay right here for as long as you need." The checkup was just awful to watch. Eleanor was gentle. Truly she was. But every time she laid a hand on Rosie, the little girl pulled back. Every single time she asked Rosie to turn, the child's body went stiff with fear. But she never cried or screamed. She just held onto Nate's hand like her life depended on it, and stared hard at the wall. "Sweet Lord," Eleanor whispered when she finally saw Rosie's back. "How old are these marks?" "Some are months old," Nate said through a tight jaw. "Some are newer than that." Eleanor's hands shook as she wrote down every scar, every bruise, every mark that told a story of pure cruelty. "There are at least 15 different times here, all in different stages of healing." Her voice was thick with emotion. This was not about punishment. This was torture. "Can you prove it happened at the orphanage? I can prove it did not happen on your ranch. The oldest scars are from months before you had her." Eleanor looked at him, her eyes full of fire. "This child was being beaten all the time, Mr. Holloway, by somebody with a belt or a strap, somebody who had power over her. Whitmore. Or someone he had working for him." Eleanor packed up her bag. "My report will be ready for the court hearing. And Mr. Holloway, no matter how this turns out, I need you to know that you saved this little girl's life." After Eleanor was gone, Rosie sat tired and shaking on Nate's lap. "Did I do good?" "You did so good, sweetheart. You were so brave. Will it help us?" "I think it will. I sure hope so." Rosie was quiet for a bit. Then she said, "Papa." The word caught in Nate's throat. She had called him that before, but not like this. Not with so much purpose behind it. "Yeah. If the bad man wins, will you still remember me?" His arms tightened around her. "Nobody is going to win but us." "But if he does," her voice was tiny but strong. "If they make me go back, will you remember that I was happy right here? That I had a papa and my own horse and all the cookies I wanted?" "I need to know," Rosie pleaded. She looked right up at him with those big brown eyes. "I need to know someone will remember I was happy, even if it was not for very long." Nate could not talk, could not even breathe. All he could do was hold this small child who had already learned that happiness could be snatched away. "I will remember," he finally whispered. "But it is not going to happen. I promise you that." 2 days before they were due in court, everything went and changed. A young woman showed up at the ranch, barely 18 years old, skinny as a rail, with a haunted look in her eyes that reminded Nate of Rosie in a way that made him sick. "Mr. Holloway," she said, twisting her hands. "My name is Sarah Miller. I used to live at Reverend Whitmore's home for children. Come on inside." Her story came pouring out in the kitchen while Martha put a warm cup of tea in her hands. "I was there for 6 years, from the time I was 8 until I was too old at 14. Sarah's voice was shaky, but she kept going. "The beatings were just a regular thing. If you talked back, did not work fast enough, or even just looked at him the wrong way. But that was not the worst of it. What was the worst part? The ones he sold." Sarah's face got pale as a sheet. "It was mostly the pretty girls, the young ones. Families would come and look us over like we were cattle. They would pay Whitmore and just take a girl away." "For adoption?" "No, something else." She looked right at Nate. "I had a friend named Mary. She was 7. A couple from Helena paid $50 for her, and she left thinking she was getting a family. What happened to her? I saw her 2 years later in Helena. She was working in a—" Sarah stopped and swallowed hard. "In a bad house. She either did not know who I was or pretended not to." Martha made a noise like she had been hit. "And Mrs. Price?" Nate asked in a low voice. "She took 3 girls when I was there, said she needed them for help around her house." Sarah's hands gripped her teacup. "We never saw them again. They never wrote. They were just gone. Are you willing to say this in court? That is why I am here." Sarah lifted her chin, a little spark of fight finally showing through all that fear. "I heard what you did at that sale. How you saved that little girl. Nobody ever saved us, Mr. Holloway. Nobody even tried. You are a brave woman for coming here." "I am scared to death," Sarah said. "Whitmore has folks in his pocket all over. If he finds out I came to you, you will stay right here at the ranch until this is all over. I could not possibly—" "You can and you will," Martha said in a voice that left no room for argument. "This house has plenty of space, and nobody bothers a guest under my roof." That night, Nate sat with William Hart past midnight, laying out everything they had. They had Eleanor's medical report, Sarah's story, and money records William had found. The records showed payments from Mrs. Price to Whitmore's orphanage that did not line up with any official adoptions. "It is not a sure thing," William told him. "A slick lawyer could find holes in it, but it is enough to make a judge think twice. Maybe it is enough to save Rosie. Maybe is not good enough. It is all we have got." Nate just stared at the papers all over his desk. "What if we lose? Then we fight it. We file papers. We delay. But in the meantime, Rosie goes back there." William was quiet for a good while. "There might be one other way. I am listening. If you were a married man, the court would see you in a different light. A stable family. A mother for Rosie. I am not going to marry some woman just to win in court. I know, but it is something to think about." William got up and gathered his papers. "You should get some sleep, Mr. Holloway. Tomorrow is going to be a long one." But Nate did not sleep. He sat on the floor in Rosie's room, watching her breathe and counting down the hours until his whole world could be torn apart. The morning of the hearing came up hot and mean. Nate put on his best suit, the same one he wore for Clara's funeral. Rosie had on a new dress Martha had made, white with little blue flowers, and her hair was in a neat braid. "Do I look pretty?" she asked, twirling around for him. "You are the prettiest girl in all of Montana. Pretty enough for you to keep me?" The question just ripped him apart. "Rosie, listen to me. No matter what happens in there today, you are worth keeping. Do you understand? This is not about you being good enough. This is about grown-ups fighting over something they should not be fighting over in the first place." She gave a slow nod. "Okay, Papa." They rode to town without a word. Martha sat in the back of the wagon with Rosie holding her hand. Sarah followed behind on a horse, looking pale but ready. The courthouse was full to bursting. Half the town was there, some curious, some on his side, but most were just there to see a show. Nate saw Whitmore right away. He was near the front in his black preacher's suit with Harriet Price standing right next to him. They both looked sure they had already won. That confidence shook just a little bit when they saw Sarah. "What is she doing here?" Harriet hissed. Whitmore's face went smooth and blank. "Nothing to worry about. The word of some runaway orphan against a man of God. No one is going to believe her." But his eyes told a different story. His eyes showed he was afraid. Judge Abraham Stone called the court to order, and the fight for Nate's future began. Whitmore's lawyer, a slick man from Helena named Patterson, went first. His words were smooth and full of fake anger. This child was taken from proper care without any permission. Mr. Holloway, for all his good intentions, went around the rules that are there to protect children. The orphanage system is there for a reason. "Objection," William said, standing up. "The auction where Mr. Holloway got custody has been held every year for 15 years, and Reverend Whitmore never had a problem with it. That is because I trusted that good families would come." Whitmore's voice boomed with false sincerity. "I never dreamed a single man with no experience would try to raise a young girl by himself." "Reverend Whitmore, you will get your turn to speak," the judge said in a hard voice. "Go on, Mr. Patterson." Patterson started painting a picture of Nate's lonely life, his lack of a family, and how there was no proper mother for the child. He made Nate sound like a lonely man playing house with a little girl who deserved better. "And what does better look like?" William asked when it was his turn. "The orphanage, where she was beaten black and blue. The system that was getting ready to sell her off to whoever had the most money? Objection, that is out of line. I will allow it, said the judge. Answer the question. The Reverend's smile never faltered. We follow all the rules for child welfare. I know nothing about any mistreatment. Then explain this, William said, handing the judge Dr. Grant's report. Judge Stone's face lost all its color as he read. 15 separate reports of beatings, William announced. Scars from a whip, bruises everywhere. All from before she was with Mr. Holloway. Children are clumsy, the other lawyer said. Not on their backs, from a leather strap, William shot back. This is abuse, Your Honor. The room started buzzing until the judge slammed his gavel for order. He turned to Whitmore. Reverend, do you care to explain? The child was already hurt when she came to us, Whitmore said with a sad shake of his head. We tried our best. That's a lie. Everyone turned. A young woman stood at the back of the room, shaking but determined. Let her speak, the judge ordered. Who are you? My name is Sarah Miller. I was in that man's orphanage for 6 years. I know every single thing that happens in that place. I know about the hungry bellies and the cruel hands. And I know all about the children who just vanish. They are sold off like cattle to folks who are not looking for a family. They are looking for cheap labor. Or sometimes, for things far worse. Sarah stared hard at Harriet Price, whose face had turned the color of chalk. This is an outrage. Whitmore shot up from his chair. This girl is talking nonsense. I have a list of names. Sarah's voice did not waver. Mary Collins, sold at 7 years old, was last seen in a wicked house in Helena. Catherine Moore was taken by Mrs. Price when she was 9 and was never seen again. Thomas Reed, just 8 years old, was sent to a mining company. He died in a collapse 6 months later. The courtroom erupted in noise. Judge Stone slammed his gavel until there was quiet. His face was a storm cloud. Reverend Whitmore and Mrs. Price, you will stay right here after we are done. Sheriff, you make sure they do not go anywhere. Your Honor, Patterson tried to speak up. These are just stories. Then we will find out if they are true, the judge said. But right now, we need to settle this custody issue. He turned his gaze to Nate. Mr. Holloway, I would like to hear from you now. Nate got to his feet, feeling unsteady. What is it you want to know? Why did you take this child? It was the one question everyone kept asking. He looked over at Rosie, who was holding her worn-out bear tight, her eyes locked on him. Because she was standing up there on that stage, and not a single soul wanted her. His voice came out raw and full of gravel. Because I know exactly how that feels, to think you are not worth a damn to anybody. My wife died 4 years ago. My son followed her just 3 days later. The words felt like they were torn right out of him. For 4 years, I believed that caring for anyone was just asking for heartbreak. I thought it was safer to be alone. He took a breath. Then I saw Rosie, standing there with nothing but a broken toy and a broken spirit. I could not just walk away and let her believe the lie that she was not worth saving. And you believe you can raise her? A single man? I do not. The honest answer seemed to shock the whole room. I do not know what I am doing most of the time, but I love that little girl, and I will spend all my days trying to be the father she deserves. Papa, Rosie's small voice cut through the silence. Papa, I want to talk. Please let me talk. The judge looked at her for a long, quiet moment, before he gave a slow nod. Rosie walked to the front, looking so little among the grown-ups, but her voice was strong. That bad man says I need a proper family. She looked right at Whitmore with a fire in her eyes. But I had a bed at his orphanage, and there were other children, and they still hurt us there. She turned back to the judge. Papa Nate never hurts me. He reads me stories at night. He lets me help name the new foals. He sits with me when I have bad dreams, his hands clenched into small fists. He chose me when no one else did. So I choose him back. The room was completely still. Well, now, the judge cleared his throat. That is quite a powerful thing to say, young lady. I mean it. Rosie's chin went up. If you make me go back there, I will just run away. I will run until I find my papa again because he is my family now. She walked straight back to Nate and wrapped her arms around his leg, holding on for dear life. Judge Stone was quiet for some time. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with emotion. In my 20 years as a judge, I have seldom seen such bravery. He looked from Whitmore to Harriet, and then to Nate and Rosie. And I have seldom seen such evil hiding behind a mask of goodness. It is the decision of this court that Rosie will remain in the custody of Nathaniel Holloway, starting right now and for good. Furthermore, I am calling for a complete investigation into the Silver Creek Orphanage and the dealings of Reverend Samuel Whitmore and Mrs. Harriet Price. The gavel came down like a crack of thunder. Court is adjourned. The room exploded into chaos. The sheriff stopped Whitmore from trying to run. Harriet just crumpled in her chair, sobbing. But Nate did not hear any of it. He dropped to his knees and pulled Rosie into a hug so tight he could feel her little heart beating against his chest. "We did it," she whispered. "We really won." "We surely did, sweetheart. I get to stay with you forever." She pulled away, her face wet with tears but lit up by a smile that could brighten the darkest day. "I told you we were brave," she said. Nate let out a true laugh, the first in years. "Yes, you did, little one. We surely are." And in that moment, all that mattered was that a father had found his daughter, and a daughter had found her home. The days that followed felt like waking from a terrible dream. Whitmore was arrested right there in the courthouse. The sheriff, suddenly eager to help, found records that he had earlier claimed were lost. They found 7 more children in Mrs. Price's house, all of them hungry and scarred just like Rosie. The town of Silver Creek had a dark secret to face. But Nate's whole world had become about the little girl who now laughed freely in his home. "Papa, watch me." Rosie was balancing on the top rail of the corral fence. A few months ago, she would have been too scared to even try. "Careful there, sweetheart. I am being careful." She wobbled, but then grinned when she found her balance. She jumped down, trusting completely that he would catch her. "Buttercup is getting big," she said, pointing to a young filly. "Tommy says I can ride her soon. Tommy talks a bit too much." "But Tommy is my best friend," she declared. "After you and Martha and Biscuit the dog, of course." Nate smiled. "I am honored to be in such fine company." She let out a little giggle, a sound that always made Nate's heart feel full. "Papa?" "Yes, Rosie." "Do you think my mama in heaven can see me?" The question surprised him. "I believe she can," Nate answered softly. "I believe she is very proud of you, even though I call you Papa now, especially because of that." Nate knelt down to her level. "Your mama wanted you to be safe and happy, Rosie. That is all a good parent ever wants." She thought about that for a moment. "Do you think she sent you to me?" "Martha says that sometimes angels send people to help when we need it most. Maybe my mama sent you to be my new papa." Nate felt a lump form in his throat. He had spent years thinking God had forgotten him. But looking at this happy, trusting little girl, he started to wonder. "Maybe she did," he said in a quiet voice. "Maybe she did." The 4th of July celebration arrived 2 weeks later. The town always made a big deal of it, but this year felt different, like they were all trying to heal together. Nate had not planned on going, but Rosie had heard about the pies and the fireworks that looked like flowers in the sky. When they got to the town square, it was buzzing with folks. Tables were heavy with food, and children were running all over. Rosie held Nate's hand tight, a little overwhelmed by it all, but she did not hide. Mr. Holloway. Margaret Turner, the blacksmith's wife, came over with a plate of cookies. And this must be the famous Rosie. Rosie looked up at Nate, who gave her a reassuring nod. "It is all right. Mrs. Turner is a friend. You can call me Margaret, honey." She knelt and offered a cookie. "Would you like one?" Rosie took the cookie shyly. "Thank you, ma'am." "Such wonderful manners," Margaret beamed at Nate. "She is just as precious as everyone says." Nate looked down at Rosie and smiled. Yes, she is. I surely know it. More folks came by as the day went on. Some were just curious, others wanted to apologize for ever doubting him, and some just wanted to see the little girl who helped bring Whitmore's evil to light. Rosie took it all in stride. She answered their questions politely, accepted their kind words with a shy smile, and hid behind Nate's legs only when it all got to be too much. She is really something else, Jake said, walking up with 2 glasses of lemonade. Looking at her now, you would never know all she has been through. The scars are there. She is just getting better at hiding them. Ain't we all? Jake handed him a glass. You did good, Nate. Clara would be so proud. Hearing his late wife's name was not a sharp pain anymore, just a soft ache, a reminder of a love that was real. I sure hope so. Papa! Rosie came running over. Tommy says they are having a potato sack race. Can I do it? Please? Have you ever been in a potato sack race? No, but Tommy says you just have to hop. Hopping is trickier than it sounds. Please. He could never say no to that sweet face. Go on then, but you be careful. She ran off, squealing with excitement, Tommy trying to teach her the right way to hop as they went. That boy has been good for her, Jake noted. They have been good for each other. The sack race was a beautiful mess. Rosie fell over at least 17 times, laughed so hard she could not catch her breath, and came in dead last. She did not care one bit. Did you see me, Papa? I sure did, Nate said, catching her as she threw herself at him. You were amazing. I fell down a whole lot. Well, falling is how we learn. It is the getting back up that counts. She beamed up at him, her face sweaty and smudged with dirt, but shining with pure joy. And then someone screamed. Nate's head snapped around. A crowd was gathering at the edge of the party, people pushing to see. Stay with Martha, he told Rosie, putting her down. Do not move an inch. He shoved his way through the people and saw Eleanor Grant on the ground with a young woman, one of the girls they had rescued from Mrs. Price's house. The girl was shaking violently, foam on her lips, her eyes rolled back in her head. What happened? I do not know, Eleanor said, her hands surprisingly steady. 1 minute she was fine. The next she just collapsed. Someone get my medical bag. It is in my buggy. Nate ran for it, brought it back. Eleanor worked fast, giving the girl something from a little bottle and holding her head still. The shaking slowed, then stopped. The girl's eyes fluttered open. She looked scared and confused. You are safe, Eleanor told her. You are at the celebration. Do you remember? I saw him. Saw who? The Reverend, the girl whispered. He was watching me from the crowd, came the terrified whisper. A cold dread washed over Nate. That ain't possible. He's behind bars. I saw it myself. Tears rolled down the little girl's cheeks. I saw him. Eleanor's look was grim. It's the trauma talking, Nate. But the girl was so sure of it. Nate got her settled with the other women, but a knot of unease stayed in his gut. When he got back to Rosie, Martha asked what was wrong. One of Price's girls had a spell, he said quietly. Thought she saw Whitmore. Martha crossed herself. Lord have mercy on those children. Nate looked at Rosie, whose eyes were full of worry. Some of 'em will heal, he said, with enough time and love. When dusk fell, the fireworks started. Rosie sat on Nate's lap, watching the sky burst into colors she'd never dreamed of. Papa, that one's blue, and a red one like an apple. She jumped when a loud one boomed. That one was loud, she said, pressing closer. But the good kind of scared. Like when Buttercup runs real fast. Nate smiled. The good kind of scared. I like that. Martha says being scared just means you're doing something brave. That Martha's a smart woman, Nate replied. Rosie watched the colors for a bit. Papa, she said softly, I love you. Just 3 simple words. But he'd never heard them from her before. She'd never felt safe enough to say 'em. Nate's arms tightened around her. I love you too, sweet pea. More than the whole wide world. Forever and a day, she added, relaxing against him as they watched the rest of the show. The summer went on, hot and golden. Rosie turned 4 near the end of July, and Nate threw her a small party. Just folks from the ranch and a few close friends. She'd never had a birthday party, didn't even know they were for kids like her. "All these are for me?" she asked, her eyes wide at the little pile of gifts. "Every last one. Because today is your day. Because we love you." She opened each present with care, almost like they were holy. There was a new dress from Martha, a book from Eleanor, and a carved wooden horse from Jake. From Nate, she got a locket that belonged to his late wife, Clara. "She would have loved you something fierce, Rosie," he said, clasping it around her neck. Rosie touched the small locket. "It's pretty." "Go on, open it," he urged. Inside was a tiny picture of Clara and one of Rosie. "So you always have your family close to your heart," Nate explained. Rosie's eyes filled with happy tears. Martha had baked a big chocolate cake with 4 candles. Rosie blew them all out in one big puff. "What did you wish for?" Tommy hollered. "Can't tell or it won't come true," she shot back. Later that night, Rosie found Nate on the porch swing. "I don't want to sleep," she said, climbing into his lap. "I want to remember this day forever." "Why's that?" "Because," she said, "it was the best day of my whole life." She laid her head on his chest. "I have a papa who loves me, and friends, and a locket with 2 mamas. You deserve all that and more, sweetheart." "I know," she said, sure as the sunrise. "You taught me that." A year ago, Nate had been a hollow man. Now, this little girl had shown him that some things were worth the risk of a broken heart. In early August, Dr. Grant came by with news. "The investigation into Whitmore is getting bigger," she said over coffee. "They found records going back 15 years, hundreds of children sold. The damage he did runs deep, Nate." Nate thought about Rosie, who still flinched at loud sounds and checked the locks at night. "But they can get better," he said, more a statement than a question. "With time, with love." "The ones who find what Rosie found," Eleanor agreed. "The ones who get a family willing to fight for 'em." She paused for a moment. "That's partly why I'm here. There's a boy, Samuel. He's 7. He's been in the system for years, angry and difficult. 2 families have already sent him back. And you're telling me this because?" "Because I've seen the miracle you worked with Rosie," Eleanor said plainly. "And I thought maybe you'd consider another one. Samuel's got the same walls Rosie had, the same belief that nobody could ever want him." Nate was quiet for a long while. He thought of the empty rooms in his big house. "I'd have to ask Rosie first," he finally said. A smile spread across Eleanor's face. "You're thinking about it?" "I'm not shutting the door," he replied. He found Rosie in his barn, gently brushing Buttercup's coat. He sat on a hay bale and she climbed right into his lap. "Sweetheart, can I ask you something? How would you feel about having a brother?" Rosie got real still. "A brother?" "There's a boy named Samuel. He's 7 and he doesn't have a family. He's had a rough go of it, kind of like you did." "Is he sad?" she asked. "I reckon so. And probably angry and scared, too." "Did people hurt him?" "Yes, they did." Rosie thought hard on this. Then she looked up at him with those serious brown eyes. "I was real scared when I first came here. I kept waiting for you to be mean." "I remember," Nate said softly. "But you weren't. You just let me be scared till I wasn't scared no more. Maybe Samuel just needs someone to be patient with him." "Maybe he does," Nate agreed. "And," she said, biting her lip, "maybe I could be his sister. I could teach him that the bad dreams get smaller when you got people who love you." Nate's heart felt like it would burst. "You'd be all right sharing me?" "Your heart's big enough, Papa," Rosie said, like it was the simplest truth in the world. "Martha says love don't run out, it just gets bigger." He smiled. "Martha's always right. So can Samuel come live with us?" "Let's go meet him first," Nate said. "Make sure it's a good fit for everybody." She wrapped her little arms around his neck. "I think it's all going to work out, Papa. I reckon God sent Samuel to us the same way he sent you to me. Nate's heart ached with her simple faith. You really think so? I know so, she said, her voice full of grit. That's what families do. They find each other. All week, Nate had been wrestling with his own fears. Could he handle another child, especially one with a past as dark as Samuel's? But then he'd hear Rosie's words in his head. Love does not run out. It just grows bigger. He remembered the empty man he was 4 years ago and knew some things were worth the gamble. The day before they left, Rosie handed him a small bundle. This is for Samuel, she said. Inside was a crudely carved wooden horse, stained with berry juice. Jake helped me, she explained. When I got here, all I had was biscuit. Samuel ain't got nothing. He ought to have something that's all his own. Nate was too choked up to speak. He just pulled his little girl into a bear hug. It's perfect, he finally managed to say. He's going to love it. You think so? Rosie beamed. I want him to feel like he belongs. You're going to be the best big sister in the whole world, Nate told her. She giggled. I know. I practiced on Tommy. The next morning, as Nate was loading the wagon, a rider came tearing down the road. It was William Hart, his face pale as a sheet. Nate, there's been trouble. What kind of trouble? Whitmore? William swung down from his horse, breathing hard. He busted out of jail last night. Got help from the inside, they think. The ground felt like it dropped out from under Nate's feet. Where is he? Nobody knows. But the talk is, he's coming for revenge, against the folks who put him away. Nate's blood ran cold. He turned toward the house. Martha, get Rosie. We are leaving right now. But what about Samuel? He'll have to wait, Nate said, grabbing his rifle from over the mantel. Whitmore is loose. Martha's face went white as she ran up the stairs. Jake, Nate yelled from the porch. I need every man you got, armed and ready. Papa, what is wrong? Rosie asked, standing in the doorway, clutching biscuit, her eyes wide with fear. Nate knelt down to her level. Listen, sweetheart. That bad man, Mr. Whitmore, he got away. Her face lost all its color. He's coming here. He might be, Nate said calmly. That is why we're going to go stay somewhere safe till they catch him again. The ranch will be just fine. All that matters is you. Her lip trembled, but she just lifted her chin. Okay, Papa. I will be brave. Lord, this child had more sand than most grown men. Within the hour, they were loaded up and moving out. But just as they cleared the gates, a gunshot cracked the morning air. One of the horses screamed and went down, sending the wagon lurching sideways. Get down, Nate yelled, pulling Rosie under him as more shots rang out. Through the chaos of yelling men and panicked horses, Nate heard a familiar voice. You thought you could ruin me and just walk away? Whitmore stood 30 yards off, looking ragged and half crazy, with 2 other men beside him. Let the women and the girl go, Whitmore, Nate called out. This fight is between you and me. No, Whitmore sneered, his gun swinging toward the wagon. It starts with that little devil you took in. The gun pointed straight at Rosie. A red rage exploded in Nate's chest. He got to his feet, making himself a shield. You will have to go through me first. With pleasure, Whitmore said. The next few moments were a blur of motion and instinct. He felt a bullet tear through his shoulder as he tackled Whitmore to the ground. Then, through the dust and struggle, he heard Rosie scream, Papa! Followed by another gunshot, and then a heavy silence. When Nate looked up, Whitmore was lying still. Jake stood over him, his rifle still smoking. Nate scrambled up, his eyes searching wildly. Papa! Rosie crashed into him, her arms wrapped so tight he could barely breathe. You are bleeding, she cried into his chest. It is just a scratch, he whispered, holding her close, feeling her heart pound against his. I thought he was going to take me back, she sobbed. Never, Nate's voice was raw. I will never let anyone take you from me. Do you hear me? Never. He just held her right there in the dirt, promising whatever God was listening that this little girl would never know fear like that again. She was his daughter, his reason, and nobody was ever going to take that away. Nate's shoulder healed a lot faster than Rosie's spirit. For 3 solid weeks, she was his shadow. She slept in his bed, one hand clutching Biscuit and the other tangled in his shirt. If he even stepped out to get water, she would panic. "The bad man came back," she'd say, her eyes wide with terror. "You said he could not, but he did." Nate would have to crouch down and look her right in the eye. "There are no more bad men, Rosie. Whitmore is gone for good. You promised before." The words stung because they were true. He had promised her safety, and he had failed. "I know I did, sweetheart, and I was wrong. But I can promise you this, I will always, always fight for you." Slowly, Rosie started to mend. The steady rhythm of the ranch helped, but the biggest change came when Samuel arrived in September. The meeting had been put off after the attack, but one morning, Rosie surprised them all. "I want to meet my brother," she declared. "Are you sure?" Nate asked her gently. "We can wait." "I am sure," she said, with that familiar stubborn set to her chin. "It is not fair to make Samuel wait just because I'm scared." Nate took her small hand in his. "Your feelings matter too, sweetheart." "I know," she said, squeezing his hand. "But so do his. And I reckon helping him might just help me too. Martha always says the best way to mend your own heart is to help mend someone else's. That woman is wise as an old owl." Samuel was nothing like Nate had pictured. He'd steeled himself for a storm of anger and defiance. Instead, he found a boy who was just gone. Samuel sat in that office like a stone, completely silent, his eyes locked on a piece of empty wall behind Nate. He was small for a 7-year-old, with a lean look that spoke of lean times. Rosie tugged on Nate's sleeve and whispered, "Papa, can I try?" Nate hesitated. This wasn't some spooked colt. This was a child who'd been broken. But Rosie's eyes were full of certainty. "Please." He gave a slow nod. She walked over and sat on the floor near Samuel, pulling her worn little bear Biscuit from her pocket. "This here is Biscuit," she said, plain as day. "My mama gave him to me before she went to heaven." For just a second, Samuel's eyes darted toward the bear. Rosie kept talking, turning the little bear over in her hands. "When I first came to live with Papa, I was scared something awful. I didn't say a word. I figured if I was quiet enough, folks might forget to hurt me." A tiny flicker of understanding crossed Samuel's face. "But Papa, he never forgot me. He was always just there." She glanced back at Nate, then focused again on Samuel. "It took me a long while to believe he wasn't going to hurt me. Sometimes I still get scared, but it's getting better." A long silence passed. Then, a voice so quiet it was barely a whisper asked, "How?" It was the first word Samuel had spoken. Rosie smiled a little. "Because every day he didn't hurt me was proof, and the proof just kept building up." Samuel looked past Rosie, his eyes landing on Nate. "You really never hurt her?" His voice was flat, full of suspicion. "Never," Nate said, his own voice steady. "Not one time." "Why not?" "Because she's my daughter. You don't hurt family." "People say that," Samuel said, his voice hardening. "Then they hurt you anyway." "Some people do," Nate admitted. "But I won't." "How do I know?" "You don't. Not yet." Nate crouched down to meet the boy's gaze. "But I'm willing to prove it. Every single day, for as long as it takes." Samuel just looked at him for a long time. Finally, he gave one small nod. "Okay," he whispered. "I'll try." Those first months were tough. The boy didn't trust a soul. He flinched at loud noises and quick movements. He hid food under his mattress and slept in his boots, ready to run. But Nate and Rosie didn't back down. "He ate his whole breakfast at the table today," Rosie reported one fall morning. "And he's been talking to Buttercup the horse. Says she's pretty." The real change came with the first hard freeze in November. Nate found Samuel shivering out in the barn at 3 a.m, barefoot in just his nightshirt. "Samuel," Nate said softly, "what are you doing out here, son?" The boy flattened himself against the cold wood, his eyes wide with pure terror. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I'll be good." "Didn't mean to what?" "I wet the bed," Samuel choked out, shame cracking his voice. "I tried not to, but I had a nightmare." "Hey," Nate said, moving closer real slow. "It's all right." "No, it's not. They punish you for that. I know the rules." "What rules?" Samuel trembled. "No food for a day, or the dark closet, or the belt." Nate felt his heart just break. He knelt down, making himself smaller. "Samuel, listen to me. There are no punishments like that here. Not for wetting the bed, not for anything." "You're lying." "I am not. Sheets can be washed. We can clean up. There is not a single thing you could do that would ever make me lay a hand on you. Everybody lies." "I don't," Nate said, his voice calm and sure. "I know you've got no reason to believe me yet, but I'm telling you the God's honest truth." Samuel stared, shaking from cold and fear. "Why?" he whispered. "Why do you want me? I'm bad. I ruin everything." "Everyone is wrong," Nate said, holding out his hand. "You're not bad, Samuel. You're hurt. There's a big difference. Now come on." Slowly, the boy reached out and took his hand. Back at the house, Martha was already heating water for a bath, and Rosie was pulling the dirty sheets off the bed. "I'll make hot chocolate," Rosie declared. "Papa always makes it for my nightmares." "With extra sugar," Samuel added in a tiny voice. That night, the three of them slept crammed together in Nate's big bed. It was the soundest sleep Nate had had in years. As winter wore on, Samuel started to thaw. He began talking more, first just to Rosie, then to the others. He discovered he loved the horses and had a real knack for carving wood. "He made this for me," Rosie said, showing Nate a small, perfect blue jay he'd carved. "I told him I liked them." "When did you get so wise?" Nate asked her. "I've always been wise," she said. "You're just now paying attention." Christmas that year was a big deal. "We never had a real one," Samuel told Nate quietly on Christmas Eve. "At the orphanage, we just got extra oatmeal." "Well, this will be better than oatmeal," Nate promised. "Promise?" The word was still hard for him to say. "I promise." Christmas morning was loud and joyful. The kids tore into presents of new clothes, books, and toys. Rosie got a saddle all her own, and Samuel got a fine set of carving tools. But the best gift was last. Nate handed them each an envelope. Rosie opened hers first, her eyes going wide. "Papa!" "Official adoption papers," Nate said, his voice thick. "Signed by the judge himself. You're a Holloway for good." She threw her arms around his neck, sobbing with happiness. Samuel opened his envelope slowly, his hands shaking. This says you're adopting me." "If you'll have me," Nate said, opening his arm. "You've been my son since you took my hand in that barn. This just makes the law see it too." For a second, Samuel just stared. Then he launched himself into Nate's arms. "Thank you," he cried over and over. Nate held both his children, his family, legal and forever, and felt a peace he thought he'd lost for good. Spring brought new life to the ranch. Rosie turned 5 with a big party, and Samuel had his very first birthday party when he turned 8. "I don't know what to wish for," he said, looking at his cake. "I already got everything." One day in May, William Hart came riding up with big news. The orphanage reform bill passed, he announced. The governor signed it. No more selling children. No more secret deals. It's over. He looked right at Rosie. Your courage, what you told them, it helped change the whole territory. Rosie thought about that for a moment. Good, she said finally, because nobody should ever have to feel the way I did. That summer was warm and golden. One evening, Nate sat on the porch and watched his kids chasing fireflies in the twilight. Rosie, fearless at 5, and Samuel, who was learning how to laugh at 8 years old. They were both home. They were both finally safe. You did a good thing, Nate, Martha said, settling in the chair next to him. More than good. We all did. But you started it. You were the one who stepped up when everyone else looked away. Nate just shook his head. I did not start a thing. I just did what needed doing. That is what heroes do. I am no hero. You are to them. Martha nodded toward the children. You are their whole world, Nate. Rosie scrambled onto his lap. Papa! Samuel caught a firefly. A real one. Samuel opened his hands, showing the tiny blinking light inside. I am going to let it go. I just wanted to show you. It is beautiful. Rosie says they are like little bits of magic. Samuel got a little shy. You think that is true? I reckon magic is anywhere a person decides to find it. Nate messed up his hair. And this ranch here has more magic than most places, because of us, together. As the firefly flew off, Rosie's voice was sleepy, her head on his chest. Papa. Yeah, sweetheart. Remember when you found me at that sale? I remember. I thought nobody wanted me. I thought I would never have a family. I know, but I was wrong, she yawned. I just had to wait for the right one to find me. We found each other, Nate corrected her softly. That is how it works, like you and Samuel. I am glad you found me, Samuel said quietly from the porch steps. Even though I was mean to you at first, I am glad too. Do you think, Samuel paused, there are other kids out there like us waiting for someone? I think there are more than any of us want to imagine. Maybe we could help them one day. A warm feeling bloomed in Nate's chest. Hope. Maybe we could, he said. Maybe that is exactly what we will do. And the years that followed were filled with just that. Rosie grew into a fierce young woman who fought for children the way Nate fought for her. At 18, she went to law school. I want to save them, she told Nate. The way you saved me, you already are, sweetheart. Samuel found his calling in building. He became an architect, designing beautiful homes and schools for children who had none. Every child deserves a beautiful place, he told folks. A place that tells them they are worth something. And Nate watched his children change the world. On Rosie's wedding day, 20 years after that auction, Nate walked her down the aisle. You taught me how to trust again, Papa. She squeezed his arm. How to love without being scared of losing it. You taught me first. She looked up at him, her brown eyes no longer haunted but full of joy. You taught me I was worth fighting for. You were always worth it, Rosie. From the very first second. I know, she smiled. I finally believe it. As Rosie danced with her new husband, Nate felt Clara's presence like a warm hand on his shoulder. You did good, he imagined her saying. Better than good. I had help, he thought back. The best kind. That night, after everyone had gone home, Nate sat on the ranch house porch. The same porch where he had held a scared 3-year-old and promised her she was safe. The same porch where he had watched his family grow from one broken man into something beautiful. Thinking about the old days? Samuel sat down beside him. A grown man now, strong and sure. Thinking about how far we have come, it is a long way from that auction platform. The longest journey of my life, Nate said, and the best one. Do you ever regret it, taking us on? Not for a single second. Samuel was quiet for a bit. I'm going to have a child soon. Sarah is pregnant. We just found out. Joy near burst in Nate's chest. Samuel, that is wonderful news. I am terrified, his son admitted. What if I mess it all up? You will mess up sometimes. Everybody does. But you will love them with everything you have, and that is what matters. How do you know? Because I know you, Nate said, gripping his shoulder. I watched you grow from a boy who trusted nobody into a man who loves with his whole heart. You will be an incredible father, Samuel. You taught me how. No, you chose to learn. There is a difference. Rosie appeared in the doorway, still in her white dress. There you two are, hiding from the cleanup. She came over and sat on the arm of Nate's chair. Samuel told you his news. He did. I am going to be an aunt. A real aunt. We are going to be a grandpa and an aunt, Samuel corrected her. A real family. We have always been a real family, Nate said softly, from the moment I stepped on that platform. They sat there as the stars came out. 3 people who found each other and built something true. Papa, Rosie's voice was soft. Yeah, thank you for everything. For seeing me when no one else would. Thank you for letting me. Nate kissed the top of her head. For taking a chance on a broken man who knew nothing about raising children. You learned fast. I had good teachers. And so it was. 25 years after that summer auction, Nate passed away in his sleep, with his children and his grandchildren around him. Love filled every room of the house that had once been so lonely. His last words were for Rosie, who held his hand as the sun rose over the mountains. You are worth it, he whispered. Every single fight, every fear. You were worth all of it. I know, Papa. Tears ran down her face, but she was smiling. You taught me that. Then I did my job right. He closed his eyes. And Rosie, the little girl nobody wanted, said goodbye to the man who looked at her and decided she was worth everything. Not bad for a man who went to town for a horse and came home with a family. Not bad at all. At his funeral, the whole territory seemed to show up. Families he had helped, children whose lives were changed because of one man's courage. Rosie spoke last. My father was not a complicated man, she told the crowd. He believed in hard work and keeping your word. He believed in protecting those who could not protect themselves. But what made him extraordinary was his ability to love, to see a broken child and believe she could be whole again. She looked at Samuel, standing with his own family. He taught me that family is not about blood. It is about choice. It is about showing up, day after day. Her voice was steady. My father saved my life when I was 3 years old, but more than that, he gave me a life worth living. He gave me a love worth believing in. She lifted her chin with that old familiar determination, and I will spend the rest of my days making sure his legacy continues, that every child who feels unwanted knows there is hope. You showed me that every person deserves someone in their corner, Papa. Now it is my turn. When the crowds headed on home, the family stayed. Rosie, Samuel, Tommy, and Martha stood together while the children chased each other, their laughter a bright spot in the quiet. They watched the sun set behind the mountains from Nate's graveside. He would have hated all this fuss, Samuel said, his voice thick. Rosie laughed right through her tears. He would have loved every minute, and just griped about it later. Yeah, same thing, he agreed. In that moment, a warm breeze felt just like her father's hand on her shoulder, and she knew he was proud. I know, Papa, she whispered. The Holloway Ranch still stands, and over the fireplace a portrait hangs. It shows a family not posing but living, caught in a moment of pure joy. The small plaque reads, Family is not born. Family is built. That was the real legacy of Nathaniel Holloway. Not the land or the horses, but a simple truth he found while standing on an auction block looking at a child no one else would claim. He learned that some people are worth the fight. He went looking for a horse and came home with a daughter. He made room in his heart and found a son. He believed himself alone and built a family. In finding them, he truly found himself. That is the power of making a choice. That is the miracle of finding where you belong. That is what it means to love with everything you have, forever. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.